Sometimes the most ordinary moments become the doorways to extraordinary transformations. What happens when a simple act of kindness between strangers becomes the catalyst that reshapes two lives forever? When Sarah knocked on Marcus's door that stormy November evening, neither of them knew they were about to embark on a journey that would challenge everything they believed about trust, healing, and the power of human connection. This is the true story of how one man's offer of shelter became the beginning of a promise that would change not just two lives, but an entire community. What started as a desperate plea for help during a thunderstorm would evolve into something neither Sarah nor Marcus could have imagined. Sometimes the universe places exactly the right people in our path at exactly the right moment, and what follows is nothing short of miraculous. The rain hammered against the windows of Marcus Chen's small apartment like thousands of tiny fists demanding entry. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the stack of medical bills that seemed to grow taller each week, while his laptop displayed another rejection email from a potential employer. At 34, Marcus had never imagined his life would look like this. 6 months ago, he had been a successful software engineer with a corner office and a promising future. Then came the diagnosis that changed everything. The knock at his door was so faint that Marcus almost missed it over the sound of the storm. He wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at 9:30 on a Tuesday night. When he opened the door, he found a young woman standing in the hallway, soaked to the bone and shivering. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, and her clothes dripped steadily onto the worn carpet of his apartment building's corridor. Sarah Martinez had been walking for 3 hours in the rain, carrying nothing but a small backpack and the weight of a decision that had taken her months to make. At 28, she had finally found the courage to leave the life that was slowly destroying her, but she hadn't planned for the storm that had turned her careful escape into a desperate search for shelter. She had chosen this building because it was the only one with lights still on, and Marcus's door was the first one she had worked up the nerve to approach. Marcus saw the fear in her eyes immediately. It was a look he recognized from his own reflection during the darkest moments of his recent struggles. Without hesitation, he stepped aside and gestured for her to come in. Sarah hesitated for just a moment, weighing the risks of trusting a complete stranger against the certainty of spending the night in the storm. Something in Marcus's gentle expression made the decision for her. As she stepped into the warmth of his small apartment, Sarah noticed the careful way Marcus moved, the slight tremor in his hands, and the pill bottles lined up on the kitchen counter. She didn't ask questions, just as he didn't press her for details about why she was wandering the streets alone on such a terrible night. Instead, Marcus offered her a towel and pointed toward the bathroom where she could change out of her wet clothes. While Sarah dried off, Marcus made tea and tried to process what had just happened. He had always been a private person, someone who kept to himself and avoided complications. His illness had only intensified this tendency, making him even more cautious about letting people into his carefully controlled world. Yet something about the woman at his door had bypassed all his usual defenses. Sarah emerged from the bathroom wearing dry clothes from her backpack, her long hair wrapped in the towel Marcus had given her. She found him sitting on his worn couch, 2 steaming mugs on the coffee table between them. The apartment was small but clean, filled with books and the soft glow of several lamps that made it feel warmer than its size might suggest. They talked carefully at first, sharing only the basics. Sarah explained that she was between places and had gotten caught in the storm. Marcus mentioned that he was currently unemployed and spending most of his time at home. Neither of them revealed the deeper truths that had led them to this moment, but there was an unspoken understanding between them that some stories needed time before they could be told. As the night wore on, their conversation began to flow more naturally. Sarah discovered that Marcus was incredibly well-read and had a dry sense of humor that made her laugh despite everything she had been through. Marcus found himself drawn to Sarah's intelligence and the quiet strength she carried beneath her obvious vulnerability. She asked thoughtful questions about the books on his shelves and listened carefully to his answers, making him feel heard in a way he hadn't experienced in months. When it came time to figure out sleeping arrangements, Marcus offered Sarah his bed while he took the couch. She protested, not wanting to inconvenience him further, but he insisted with a gentleness that reminded her of her grandfather, the only person in her family who had ever made her feel truly safe. As she settled into his bed, surrounded by the scent of clean sheets and the distant sound of rain still pattering against the windows, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years: peace. Marcus lay on his couch, staring at the ceiling and wondering what he had gotten himself into. His rational mind told him he had made a mistake, that inviting a stranger into his home was reckless and potentially dangerous. But his heart told a different story. For the first time since his diagnosis, he had spent an evening focused on something other than his own problems. Taking care of Sarah, even in such a small way, had awakened something in him that he thought his illness had destroyed. The next morning brought sunshine and the kind of crisp clarity that only comes after a cleansing storm. Sarah woke to the smell of coffee and found Marcus in the kitchen, moving slowly but purposefully as he prepared breakfast. His hands shook slightly as he cracked eggs into a pan, and she noticed him pause occasionally to steady himself against the counter. She wanted to offer help but sensed that maintaining his independence was important to him. Over breakfast, they began to share more substantial pieces of their stories. Marcus revealed that he had Parkinson's disease, diagnosed just as his career was taking off. The tremors and fatigue had cost him his job, and the medical expenses had quickly eaten through his savings. He spoke matter-of-factly about his situation, but Sarah could hear the underlying fear and frustration in his voice. Sarah told him about the abusive relationship she had finally escaped from, about the years of walking on eggshells and believing that she deserved the treatment she received. She described the careful planning it had taken to leave, the money she had saved in secret, and the terror she felt about starting over with nothing but hope and determination. As they shared their stories, both Marcus and Sarah realized they had found something rare, someone who understood what it meant to have your life completely upended, to face an uncertain future with limited resources and damaged confidence. They recognized in each other the particular kind of courage it takes to keep going when everything seems stacked against you. Sarah knew she should leave that morning and continue with her plan to start over in a new city, but something made her hesitate. Marcus had given her more than just shelter from the storm. He had reminded her that kindness still existed in the world, that there were people who would help without expecting anything in return. The thought of walking away from that felt like losing something precious before she had fully understood its value. Marcus found himself hoping Sarah would stay, at least for a little while longer. Her presence had brought life back into his apartment and reminded him that he was still capable of connecting with another person in a meaningful way. When she mentioned looking for work in the area, he couldn't hide his relief. As the morning stretched into afternoon, they fell into an easy rhythm. Sarah helped Marcus organize his medical paperwork, bringing her background in administrative work to bear on the chaos of insurance claims and treatment schedules. Marcus shared his knowledge of the neighborhood, pointing out which grocery stores had the best deals and which bus routes were most reliable. By evening, it was clear that neither of them was ready to say goodbye. Sarah called the friend she had planned to stay with in another city and explained that she had decided to remain where she was for a while longer. Marcus found himself offering her the use of his couch until she could find a place of her own, surprising himself with how much he wanted her to accept. That night, as Sarah settled in for her second night in Marcus's apartment, both of them recognized that something significant was beginning. They had found each other at exactly the moment when they both needed proof that compassion and connection were still possible. Neither of them knew where this unexpected partnership would lead, but they were both curious enough to find out. The storm that had brought them together was just the beginning. In the days and weeks that followed, Marcus and Sarah would discover that sometimes the most profound changes in our lives start with the simplest acts of human decency. Sometimes offering shelter to a stranger is really offering yourself the chance to become the person you never knew you could be. 3 weeks after the storm, Sarah and Marcus had settled into a routine that surprised them both with its natural comfort. Sarah had found a part-time job at a local nonprofit organization that helped domestic violence survivors, work that felt meaningful in a way her previous administrative positions never had. Marcus had begun freelancing as a web designer, taking on small projects that he could manage around his medical appointments and the unpredictable nature of his symptoms. Their apartment, as they had both begun thinking of it, had transformed into something neither of them had experienced before, a genuine home. Sarah brought warmth and organization to the space, while Marcus contributed his quiet wisdom and unexpected culinary skills. They discovered they both loved old movies, terrible puns, and the kind of deep conversations that lasted until sunrise. The arrangement worked because they gave each other exactly what they needed most: space to heal and presence to remind them they weren't alone. Sarah helped Marcus navigate the complex world of disability benefits and medical insurance, using her administrative skills to untangle bureaucratic knots that had been overwhelming him for months. In return, Marcus provided Sarah with the steady, unconditional support she had never experienced in a relationship, helping her rebuild her confidence one small victory at a time. Their friendship deepened through small, everyday moments. Marcus taught Sarah how to make his grandmother's dumpling recipe, patiently guiding her hands as she learned to fold the delicate wrappers just right. Sarah introduced Marcus to her love of gardening, and, together they coaxed life from a collection of small plants on the fire escape that became their own tiny oasis in the concrete jungle of the city. On his bad days, when the tremors were worse and the fatigue made even simple tasks feel impossible, Marcus found that Sarah's presence was a comfort without being a burden. She never treated him like he was broken or made him feel guilty for needing help. Instead, she simply adjusted their plans and found ways to make whatever they were doing together work within the constraints of his condition. Sarah's healing process was less visible but equally profound. With Marcus, she was learning to trust her own judgment again, to speak up for what she wanted and needed without fear of angry retaliation. She was discovering that healthy relationships involved mutual support and respect, concepts that had been foreign to her for so long that they felt revolutionary. 4 months into their unlikely partnership, Sarah received an offer that would have seemed like a dream come true just months earlier. The nonprofit organization where she worked wanted to promote her to a regional coordinator position, but it would require relocating to another state. The salary was substantial, the opportunity for advancement clear, and the chance to help even more survivors of domestic violence aligned perfectly with her growing sense of purpose. Marcus encouraged her to take the position, even as his heart sank at the thought of losing the person who had become his closest friend and strongest ally. He knew that Sarah deserved every opportunity to build the life she wanted, and he refused to let his own needs hold her back. They spent long evenings discussing the pros and cons of the offer, with Marcus pushing Sarah to consider all the ways the new position could benefit her future. But Sarah found herself hesitating for reasons she was only beginning to understand. The life she had built with Marcus felt more real and valuable than any career advancement could provide. She had never experienced the kind of partnership they had created together, where two people could support each other's growth without losing themselves in the process. The decision became clearer when Marcus had a particularly difficult episode with his Parkinson's symptoms. Sarah came home from work to find him on the kitchen floor, having fallen while trying to prepare dinner. He wasn't seriously injured, but he was embarrassed and frustrated by his body's betrayal. As Sarah helped him to the couch and assessed him for injuries, she realized that walking away from this relationship would feel like abandoning herself as much as abandoning Marcus. That night, Sarah made a choice that surprised everyone, including herself. She called her supervisor and declined the promotion, explaining that she had found something in her current position and living situation that was too valuable to give up. Instead, she proposed developing a pilot program for domestic violence survivors right there in their city, using the local connections and community relationships she and Marcus had been building together. Marcus was initially concerned that Sarah was sacrificing her career for him, but she helped him understand that her decision wasn't about limiting her options. It was about choosing to invest in the most healthy and supportive relationship she had ever experienced. She was learning that sometimes the best opportunities aren't the ones that require you to leave everything behind, but the ones that allow you to build something meaningful exactly where you are. Their living arrangement evolved as their friendship deepened. They developed better systems for managing Marcus's medical care, with Sarah helping him track symptoms and medication schedules while he taught her about advocating effectively with healthcare providers. Marcus used his technical skills to help Sarah design better intake systems and resource databases for her work with domestic violence survivors. The pilot program Sarah proposed became a reality when she and Marcus decided to combine their skills and experiences into something larger than either of them could accomplish alone. Sarah's understanding of trauma recovery and Marcus's background in technology created opportunities to develop innovative support systems for people rebuilding their lives after crisis. They started small, creating a simple app that helped domestic violence survivors track their healing progress, connect with resources, and build support networks. Marcus handled the technical development while Sarah focused on user experience and community outreach. Their first-hand experience with starting over after life-changing events made them uniquely qualified to understand what people in crisis actually needed. As word spread about their collaborative work, other organizations began reaching out for consultation and partnership. Sarah discovered she had a talent for training other advocates, while Marcus found that his patient, methodical approach to problem-solving was perfectly suited to developing accessible technology solutions for vulnerable populations. Their success wasn't measured just in professional achievements, but in the way they had learned to navigate life's challenges as a team. When Sarah had nightmares about her past relationship, Marcus knew exactly how to provide comfort without overwhelming her with attention. When Marcus struggled with the progressive nature of his condition and fears about his future, Sarah helped him focus on what he could control while accepting what he couldn't. 18 months after that stormy night when they first met, Sarah and Marcus realized they had built something extraordinary together. Their relationship had evolved far beyond the temporary shelter arrangement it had started as, becoming instead a foundation for the kind of life both of them had thought was impossible. Sarah had not only recovered from her abusive relationship but had discovered strengths and capabilities she never knew she possessed. Working alongside Marcus, she had developed expertise in trauma-informed technology design and had become a sought-after consultant for organizations wanting to better serve survivors of various forms of crisis. Marcus had found that his Parkinson's diagnosis, while still challenging, no longer defined the limits of what his life could include. With Sarah's support and partnership, he had created meaningful work that utilized his skills while accommodating his physical needs. More importantly, he had learned that interdependence wasn't the same as dependence, and that accepting help from someone who cared about him actually made him stronger, not weaker. Neither of them had expected their story to unfold this way. Sarah had thought she was simply fleeing one life and hoping to build another. Marcus had believed his diagnosis meant accepting a smaller, more isolated existence. Instead, they had discovered that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin when we least expect them, born from simple acts of kindness that grow into something neither person could have created alone. As their second winter together approached, both Sarah and Marcus understood that they had found something rare and precious, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and the kind of deep friendship that makes everything else possible. They were no longer just helping each other survive their respective challenges, they were thriving together in ways that honored both their individual strengths and their collaborative potential. 2 years after that first stormy night, Sarah stood in the community center where she and Marcus were about to launch their most ambitious project yet. The room was filled with domestic violence survivors, social workers, healthcare providers, and technology specialists, all gathered to witness the unveiling of what had started as a simple app and evolved into a comprehensive support ecosystem. The Second Chance Network had grown from Sarah and Marcus's kitchen table conversations into a nationally recognized program that combined technology, peer support, and professional resources in ways that had never been attempted before. Their approach was revolutionary because it was designed by people who had lived through crisis themselves, who understood from personal experience what actually helped during the most difficult moments of starting over. Marcus watched Sarah address the crowd with a confidence and authority that still amazed him. The woman who had arrived at his door soaked and afraid had become a national speaker on trauma recovery and innovative support systems. Her transformation wasn't just personal, it was radiating outward to touch hundreds of other lives. Sarah's presentation focused on the core principle that had guided all their work, the belief that people in crisis are experts on their own experiences and should be empowered to direct their own healing process. The technology they had developed wasn't designed to fix people or tell them what to do, instead, it created platforms for connection, resource sharing, and peer support that honored each person's unique path to recovery. The app they had originally created for tracking healing progress had evolved into a secure social network where survivors could connect with others who understood their experiences. Marcus had developed innovative privacy features that allowed users to share as much or as little as they felt comfortable with, while still benefiting from community support and resource sharing. But technology was only one part of their program. The physical community centers they had helped establish in 6 cities provided safe spaces where people could access services, attend support groups, and participate in skill-building workshops. Sarah's training programs had prepared hundreds of volunteers to provide peer support, while Marcus's accessibility expertise ensured that all their services could be accessed by people with various physical and cognitive abilities. The success of their program had attracted national attention and significant funding, but Sarah and Marcus had been careful to maintain the personal, human-centered approach that made their work effective. Every decision was filtered through their own experiences of vulnerability and recovery, ensuring that they never lost sight of what it actually felt like to be on the receiving end of social services. As the evening's presentation concluded and attendees mingled, sharing stories and making connections, Marcus felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the unexpected journey his life had taken. His Parkinson's symptoms had progressed over the past 2 years, requiring adjustments to how he worked and lived, but he had never felt more purposeful or connected to meaningful work. Sarah found him sitting quietly in a corner of the community center, watching the animated conversations happening throughout the room. She settled beside him, following his gaze to a group of survivors who were exchanging contact information and making plans to stay connected after the event. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both reflecting on how far they had come from that night when Sarah had knocked on Marcus's door seeking shelter from a storm. The woman who had been afraid to trust anyone was now helping others learn to trust themselves. The man who had thought his diagnosis meant the end of his useful life had become an innovator whose work was improving thousands of lives. Sarah turned to Marcus with an expression he had never seen before, one that combined determination, vulnerability, and something that looked like joy. She told him that she had been thinking about everything they had built together, about the way their unexpected partnership had transformed not just their own lives but had created ripples of positive change throughout their community and beyond. Marcus listened as Sarah explained that she had come to understand something important about the nature of promises. She said that when he had offered her shelter the first night, he had made an unspoken promise to see her as worthy of care and respect. That simple act of recognition had been the foundation for everything that followed. Sarah continued, explaining that she wanted to make a promise in return, one that would acknowledge the partnership they had created and commit them both to continuing the work they had started together. She wasn't talking about a romantic relationship, she clarified, but about something deeper and more intentional, a chosen family partnership built on shared values, mutual support, and collaborative purpose. Marcus felt tears forming as Sarah outlined her vision for formalizing their commitment to each other and to their shared mission. She was proposing that they create a legal partnership that would ensure their work could continue regardless of what challenges his health condition might bring, while also establishing the kind of intentional, committed relationship that honored what they had built together. The promise Sarah was offering wasn't conventional, but it was perfect for who they had become together. She was proposing a life partnership based on friendship, shared purpose, and mutual care rather than romantic love. It was a recognition that the most important relationships in our lives don't always fit traditional categories, and that commitment and love can take many different forms. Marcus accepted Sarah's proposal with the same instinct that had led him to open his door to her 2 years earlier. He understood that what they were creating together was rare and precious, worth protecting and nurturing for as long as they were both able to participate in it. Their commitment ceremony took place 6 months later in the same community center where they had launched their program. The room was filled with the survivors, advocates, and community partners who had become their extended chosen family. Instead of traditional wedding vows, Sarah and Marcus made promises that reflected the unique nature of their partnership and their shared commitment to creating positive change in the world. Sarah promised to continue seeing Marcus as whole and capable regardless of how his condition progressed, to support his autonomy while offering help when needed, and to honor the wisdom and insight his experiences brought to their shared work. Marcus promised to continue believing in Sarah's strength and potential, to support her growth and ambitions, and to maintain their partnership as an equal collaboration regardless of how their individual circumstances might change. But their most important promise was made to their community. They committed to continuing their work together for as long as they were able, to mentoring others who wanted to create similar programs, and to ensuring that their model of peer-supported recovery could outlast their own involvement in it. The ceremony concluded with the launch of their latest initiative, a fellowship program that would train other survivor advocate pairs to create similar programs in their own communities. Sarah and Marcus had realized that their most significant contribution wasn't just the specific services they had developed, but the model they had created for how people with lived experience of trauma could become powerful agents of healing and change. 3 years later, the Second Chance Network had expanded to operate in 23 cities, with new programs launching regularly. Sarah had become a nationally recognized expert on peer support models and trauma-informed technology design. Marcus had developed accessibility consulting services that helped organizations create more inclusive programs and services. Their personal partnership had deepened and evolved as Marcus's Parkinson's symptoms progressed. They had moved to a larger apartment that could better accommodate his mobility needs, and Sarah had taken on more of the physical aspects of their shared work while Marcus focused on strategy and technology development. But the core of their relationship remained the same: mutual respect, shared purpose, and the kind of deep friendship that made everything else possible. They had proved that families can be chosen, that partnerships can be built on many different kinds of love, and that some of the most beautiful relationships grow from simple acts of kindness between strangers. Looking back, both Sarah and Marcus understood that the storm that brought them together had been a gift, though neither of them could have recognized it at the time. Sarah's desperate search for shelter and Marcus's instinctive offer of help had set in motion a series of events that had not only transformed their own lives but had created lasting positive change for hundreds of others. Their story had become a testament to the power of human connection and the possibility of healing that exists when people are willing to see each other as worthy of care and respect. The promise that had changed everything wasn't grand or dramatic, it was simply the commitment to continue showing up for each other and for their shared vision of a world where no one has to face their darkest moments alone. The woman who had knocked on a stranger's door seeking shelter from a storm had become a leader who helped others find their own strength. The man who had offered that shelter had discovered that sometimes the greatest gift you can give another person is the chance to give something back. Together, they had built something beautiful from the wreckage of their former lives, proving that new beginnings are possible at any stage of life when you find the right person to build them with.